Hey everybody, welcome back to Vanta EDC. Tonight I'll be doing a more than 1 month review of the CJRB Ekko button lock. As you can see, I got two versions of it right in front of you. And so but the basics of what this knife is, it is a Ray Laconico design, which actually first debuted as a custom frame lock by Ray himself. But then he licensed the design to CJRB, and they actually have a liner lock version as well as the button lock version. And so these two button lock versions that you see right now, this is the Knife Center exclusive with the black micarta titanium bolster, and then this is one of the just a standard initial production run. They say it's carbon fiber. I've heard people say that it's just G10 with a carbon fiber sticker over it. Either way, these are two production versions that have come out so far. So some of the basic specs, for the most part, these knives are the same minus the kind of scale materials and the blade finish. The blade is 3.23 inches long. It's about 0.10 inches thick, I believe. It is a flat ground blade in AR RPM 9 steel, and it is, as you can see, a sheep's foot. And so, and it's for deployment methods, it's got this opening hole, and it's also got this front flipper right here. So you can actually do it that way with the side of your index finger and over the top as well. So it's very fidget friendly because of those multiple ways you can open it. When it's closed, it is 4.25 inches long. This version is 3.8 ounces. This version is 3.7 ounces. I mentioned these micarta and tie scales, and then this is the carbon fiber / G10, whatever. Both are running on steel liners. You can see here, that's where the micarta and the tie are on top, and then steel liners there. And between these two versions, the blade shape, the blade steel, the liners, the bearings for the action, those are also the same. Most of the basics, except for the scale material, and then the blade finish. This is a satin finish. Satin finish right there. Pretty nice satin finish. And then this is a stone wash or some sort of like bead blast, whatever. I don't know how to differentiate between those. So why I got this knife and why I ended up getting two of these knives, actually, because I did not get them at the same time. More broadly speaking, I'm on this quest to find the ideal EDC button lock for me. I know my personal preferences when it comes to dimensions and blade shape, blade steel, all that sort of stuff. So with this one, and it kind of for me personally, I put this also in the context of the fact that I had already owned the CJRB Pyrite, which is a great budget EDC button lock that most of you, if you're watching this, probably already know about. This came out first before the Ekko, and so I already owned the Pyrite and loved a lot about it, but there were things about it that either I felt like were missing, or I would personally want to be different. And so one of the things that drew me to this, even though I already have a Pyrite and it's really good for a lot of things, is that this has multiple deployment methods, whereas the Pyrite just has the thumb studs. I've mentioned already that there's the opening hole, and then there's the front flipper. So I like that because for me, in reality, I use my knives more when I'm fidgeting with them more than anything else. And so to me, having a fidgety knife is really a high priority, even though it's obviously not the most practical priority. It is just a high priority for me personally. Now, I also personally really like the blade shape, especially compared to, again, the Pyrite, which is this drop point, spear point, whatever you want to call it, blade shape. I prefer having like a sheep's foot or reverse tanto or Warncliffe blade shape, just because of the more utilitarian nature. You need less severe of an angle when you're doing draw cuts for like opening packages and doing other sort of work that might require draw cuts. So I like that. It's just a more ergonomic sort of blade shape, more utilitarian blade shape. And also, similar to the Pyrite, these are also very good value. This base model, I think, is $50, like minimum, like MAP pricing, basically. And this one's only basically $74, I think, before tax and shipping and whatnot. So very good value for what you're paying. And again, because I like the Pyrite so much, but also didn't didn't have everything that I personally enjoy or want in the Pyrite. I really wanted to get another CJRB budget button lock to see if it was a better fit for me. And I do, for me personally, I think it is. And we'll get into more of the reasons why. And so, overall, my experience using and like owning and using these knives so far is, the bottom line is I highly recommend this knife. I think it's one of the best under $100 knives that's available right now. I know this version might not be available at the moment because they sold out during at least the initial release of these, but I think they're going to be doing a restock sometime this month, maybe, is what I've heard. I think someone commented that in my unboxing video on this one. I shouldn't say that, not unboxing, my initial impressions video. I don't like the term unboxing. But yeah, I basically, once I got this one first, but then I didn't know this was coming out, and then it came out, and then I bought it basically instantly, and basically this has not been in my pocket at all since I got this one. But between the time that I first got this and ever since I've got this one of these knives has basically been in my pocket almost every day for the last, I think it's almost a month and a half actually, because I think this came out I got this in like early-ish April, and it's June 1st today. And so, yeah, I highly recommend this. I've carried it so much more than any other knife, in a very long time. And the only time I really don't, I don't really carry this now, partially because I'm planning on probably giving it away at some point, probably. But this one, since I got it, I've been, the only time I really don't carry it is when I know I'm going to be outside or just doing something where I get super sweaty, just because I don't want to get the micarta too stained by my sweat, because I'm a very sweaty person. So I mentioned that this knife is super fidgety, especially compared to knives like the Malibu or the Mordax or the Pyrite, which only have one method of deployment. With the Malibu and Mordax, they're just flipper only, and then with the Pyrite, it's thumb studs only. And so for me, having the thumb hole where you can do the reverse flick, the thumb flick, the side of the thumb, side of the index finger over the top, and then of course you can just fling it with the button itself. I mean, there's so many ways to open this knife and close. Obviously not so many ways to close it, but yeah, it's just super fidgety and really satisfying actually. So the action is very smooth, kind of similarly smooth to the Pyrite, I would say. But it has this added benefit where, at least with so I only have the G10 version. My wife, I got her the one with the pack of wood and the titanium bolster. So I haven't had much time using this, but she has. But anyway, the action is smooth, but it's not very satisfying from an acoustic perspective, like auditory perspective. It's pretty soft, and I mean, like, it has a click and everything like that, but it's there's not much ring. Whereas this, you hear that? It snaps out, especially the harder you flip it, and then when you close it, you hear that, like, it bounces. So there's this ringing, and I think what's that sound is coming from right here. This part of the sharpening choil is actually contacting the stop pin. This stop pin right here. So it's bouncing, and so there's this literal metal on metal impact. It's very satisfying. And so, yeah, and I mean, on top of that, from an actual functional standpoint, this is a very slicey blade, and so it's really good for cardboard cutting. I literally was doing some cardboard cutting today with this. Good for box and package opening, thin blade stock, so it's easier to slip into these tighter, gaps, that sort of thing. So yeah, I'll get into some of the small details, the things that I like, and then of course the things that I would change or dislike about this knife. So I've mentioned the acoustics. It is, you could say superficial or unimportant, but for me, it's just really satisfying aspect of actually opening and closing, fidgeting with this knife on a regular basis. And then the smoothness of the action. It's on bearing, so it's going to be smooth, and CJRB does a pretty good job of creating a smooth action on these button lock knives in my experience so far. Now, one thing that I do like too is that if you only partially disengage it and don't let it fall shut all the way, you let it stick here. If you do this, then it just closes itself. It doesn't stay doesn't really want to stay open. It'll just close itself if you give it just the right orientation, I guess, relative to gravity. So yeah, I like the smoothness of the action, and just that it wants to close regardless of whether or not you fully closed it or held the button down to close it all the way. Another thing that I do like this blade shape, and I like the thickness of it. Again, I think the thickness contributes a lot to the sliciness of it, as well as, at least in this case, this is the satin grind, which I don't know if they do it on any other versions other than the Knife Center exclusive version as of yet. I haven't been paying super close attention, so maybe they've done other exclusives with other dealers or something, but yeah. Yeah, so it's very, very slicey. And what else do I like? I like that there's this, notice this swedge here. I like this detail of this swedge angling, or inward, yeah, near the top here. And I like that the grind is fairly high. It's not like it's not an unnecessary, if the grind had ended here, like in, what do you call it? Not parallel to, but kind of on the same plane as the bottom of the thumb hole, I think it would kind of make it a little less slicey. So yeah, a lot of aspects of this blade that I really like. Another small detail is just the geometry. I don't have much experience at all with front flippers. This is only the second front flipper design that I've owned. The first being the Vosteed, the Labrador, which is a very different style, where it's like it's rounded over the top and it has jimping. So that one is a lot harder to use for me who has very little experience with front flippers. This is it's almost impossible to fail the front flipper. And it's nice because you can do it to any degree of effort that you choose. You can do it really snappily like this and get the good acoustics, or you can just roll it open really slowly like this. Either way, it's really fun to fidget with. That's just going to be one of the words I use a lot in this video. Yeah. So I like how usable this front flipper is. The D10's dialed really well for the front flipper specifically. So with the Knife Center version, these micarta scales are ever so slightly contoured. It is, I don't think I can really show it on camera really, but the telltale kind of giveaway to me that this is contoured micarta is that it has these rings, which are kind of indicative of kind of the different height variance at these different points on the scales. And so yeah, it does make a subtle difference in hand. Like it doesn't feel as, like this one feels a lot more not brick-like, but just it feels more boxy. I don't know if that's the best way of describing it, but hopefully you kind of understand what I mean. But yeah, so I like the contouring of the micarta scales, and I like the overall feel of the knife in hand. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a really good choke up position. Like you can kind of choke up here, but you do risk slipping up and into the beginning of the edge here. So I just use it like this basically, which is fine. Or I guess doing draw cuts, stuff like this, you can kind of rest your finger on the side of the top of the scales there. So yeah, I also really like that. I mean, I don't have any other knives personally that have a bolster with some sort of micarta G10 whatever scale here, but I like with this, even though it's a budget knife, the seam, essentially the manufacturing here, the seam here it's barely detectable by feel. You can tell it's there, but there's not a huge variance in the elevation between the bolster and the scale. And so I know that's for people that I've heard from other reviewers who do nicer knives with bolsters. That's something to look for, is just to see how well blended the transition is between the bolster and the scales. So it's done well. Yeah, I mentioned I really like the stonewash finish here, the satin finish here. It has a really nice handsome look to it, especially when it's clean. So yeah, now some of the, I guess you could say, negatives, issues I've had, really the only main issue I would say I've had is that the front flipper is a little pokey when it's in pocket. But I think that's just comes with the territory when you have this style of front flipper. So, it is what it is. It's not like I don't think they did something wrong or anything like that. It's more just comes with the territory. Now, personally, things I would change, or at least things that I dislike, you know, I wish that there was an actual usable finger choil on the blade and not just the sharpening choil here. That's my personal preference for me, especially because the blade is over 3 inches long. It's a 3.23 inch blade, so it's long enough to where it's like, it'd be nicer to be able to choke up further up to do like push cuts through cardboard or that sort of thing. Another thing, I would prefer, honestly, having thumb studs rather than the opening hole here. And because of the way that the thumb hole is put into this knife and the access that you have to it, especially when it comes to thumb flicking it, it's this weird sort of opening where you have to like slide your thumb upwards and it'll open, but like it's not very, I don't know, it's just not very intuitive, and it's like you do have this very narrow window, relatively speaking. Whereas with thumb studs, it's like you're not having to slide down into something, you're just pushing up against something with the pyrite here, as you can see that. And so for me, I don't love this. I mean, it's fine for the reverse flick, but yeah, I think honestly, if you had thumb studs, you might also, I don't know how much this is has to do with the detent strength of the plunger versus just the geometry and design of the opening hole and that access the ramp down into it. But yeah, it's just not as snappy as, you know, some knives are. And, you know, I recognize that it's probably hard to get the perfect sort of detent effect for when you have multiple deployments between the front flipper and the opening hole. Now, I mean, I'm glad they tuned it well for the front flipper, but at the same time, it's like, you know, you kind of have, in a way, two different, I don't know. Yeah, it's just, it'd be nice in a perfect world if they could optimize the detent strength for this. And I think thumb studs would make it also just a little easier to manipulate, to open the knife with, open the blade with. So yeah, another thing I would change. So one thing that you'll notice is, let's bring these side by side. One thing you'll notice is how tall the how tall the Ekko is compared to a knife like the pyrite. And granted, the pyrite is a pretty low profile knife overall, like thickness and height and everything like that. But this is definitely large, especially given the overall like length, I guess, size of the knife. So this, I kind of wish they would, I guess not grind it down, but yeah, just like kind of have a more gradual drop here rather than have it go straight. It goes straight from, like, this is one straight plane and then it dips off all the way here. I wish it just started curving gradually into this so that there was less of a height thing here, because when it's in pocket, like imagine this in pocket, right? Like right here, like this part is the first part to contact the back seam of your pocket. I don't know what the proper terminology is, but like the seam of your pocket, and it just wants to push the whole thing, kind of cant it, like I'm trying to imagine that, kind of cant it forward so it's not resting fully against the back seam of the pocket. So it just kind of makes it a little less what's the term? A little less compact in pocket, basically. So yeah, there's that. This isn't like a huge deal, but I think you can make this another thing that I would change that would make this perform even better than it already does is if this was a hollow grind versus just being this flat grind that it is. You know, I mean, the flat grind is good, especially because it ends fairly high up from the edge, so it's not bad at all. It's not like I'm having issues, but you know, I think it could be even slicier if you had like a really nice hollow grind here. So another thing that I would change, the button is completely smooth. And again, this is the same as the pyrite. And I think this is more so just because this is a budget knife. They're not going to spend machining time to make, you know, concentric circle ridge things milling into the button to make it more tactile or anything like that. So I can understand it from like the design choice standpoint if they're trying to make a budget knife that they don't do it, but it would be nice to have. One thing that by no means necessary, but depending on how you use this knife could be nice, is just having the jimping extend further down the spine, because right now it ends when the blade is open, it ends right here. This is as far as the jimping goes. Now, I mean, I guess since they don't have a blade finger choil here, it's not nearly that big of a deal, but like Yeah, the rest of the spine here is very slick, and so I mean, I'm not like slipping off like side to side or anything like that, but I'm definitely slipping forward when I start pushing down onto it here. It's very smooth there, so depending on how you're using this knife, it might be nice to have more jimping farther down the spine, but it's not a big deal. The last thing I would say I would change would be all the screws here minus, so the pivot I think is the only T8 screw. The rest of these, there's for the knife center exclusive version, the clip screws and then the scale screws are all T6. And even with the non-exclusive version, these screws are also T6, and the pivot screws are the only one that are T8. So not a huge deal, but it would be nice to just be able to only need one size screw, or a driver bit, I should say, when assembling, reassembling, disassembling this knife. So that's kind of all the small details of it, the things I like, things I would change. My future plans, this is a knife that I don't ever see letting go, because this is, I think I mentioned it, I think I said it at least in the title of my initial impressions of this knife, but so this is a comment more specific to the Knife Center exclusive version, but even in the non-exclusive version, I would say this is kind of like my go-to budget EDC knife at this point. And in particular, this is, in my mind, this is my go-to budget gentleman's EDC. It's got this very clean look, very non-aggressive look. It's not scary to bring out in front of non-knife people. But it just looks it's very well executed, very well designed. I think the fact that it's designed by a well-established, well-respected designer like Laconico helps bring it to that point. So yeah, it's a great design. It's a go-to for me in so many different ways. If there was ever like a more premium production version, with like a better blade steel, maybe like even S35, I would be happy with, because this is a RPM 9. It's not, by no means is a high performance steel, but like S35 or S90, which CJRB has done for like the more elevated versions of the pyrite, at least. Of course, if it did something like Magna Cut, that would be awesome, but I'm not expecting that. But again, if they did a premium version with better steel, with full tie scales that were hopefully skeletonized. One thing I didn't mention is these are not skeletonized liners, which I think was probably just because they didn't want to spend extra money on this knife to keep it at a certain price point. So yeah, if they full tie scales that were skeletonized, and if they not super important, but if they textured the button, if they made the pivot, instead of being, because this is a non-captive pivot, it's dual-sided. If they made it a one-sided captive pivot, and they like dressed it up, or at least just made it like a one-sided thing, like that'd be great. So all that said, I think there's a good chance I might try to like mod this one, or even mod this one. We'll see. I might just go try modding this one first, because I don't want to ruin a nice one that's harder to get in case I do mess it up. But yeah, like to me, the main thing would be just wanting to add that finger choil. I think I'd really enjoy this knife a lot more if it had a finger choil. But yeah, like I might even consider trying to like use a Dremel to kind of lighten, to skeletonize the liners a little bit, because the liners, they're full steel liners with no lightning cuts or skeletonization. So it could definitely benefit from that, because the point of balance as is like back here. It's not near up here where I naturally want to grip. So I think ideally you have your point of balance near the top of your grip, but it is not currently there. So yeah. I really like this knife. Highly recommend it if you're able to get this exclusive version, which is again only like $74 before tax and shipping. Like it's a really great value, honestly. Like I can't think of many knives that give you this much value at that price point in particular. And so highly recommend the Ekko button lock. I even more highly recommend this version of it, and hopefully CJRB has been doing more premium versions of the pyrite. They had like the most recent one was like I think it's S90V steel, and the scales were titanium with like shred fiber, carbon fiber inlays, which was a cool thing. It's not something I want to spend my money on, because there are other things I prefer, but if they did a more premium version of this, I could definitely see myself going for it. So Yeah, if you have any questions about the Ekko button lock, feel free to ask away in the comments. If you have your own, if you own one, or if you've handled one and you have, your own opinions on it that I haven't talked about, things you appreciate about it, things you don't like about it, feel free to throw it in the comments. Yeah, take care.